On Thursday morning, I took an hour off work to pick up Dr. Shue at the airport. Whenever he's away on business for a few days, he insists on me picking him up. I understand this as his roundabout way of saying, "Honey, I missed you, and I'm happy to oblige." Back at the office, a man and a woman stood by the entrance. Their skin was dark, with deep lines on their faces, making it hard to tell their age. As I swiped my card to open the door, they tried to follow me in. I stopped, turned around, and asked, "This is a company building. You can't just walk in. Who are you here to see?" The woman glanced at the man, and he spoke up in a gravelly voice. "We're looking for Xingyu." I looked them up and down, a bit surprised. The woman, noticing my reaction, added quickly, "We're her parents." That surprised me even more. "Why didn't you just call Xingyu then?" The woman looked embarrassed. "Well, she changed her number and didn't let us know. We finally found this place after traveling a whole day by train." "Good morning, Miss Su." Xingyu greeted me with a smile. Before I could respond, the man rushed toward her, shouting in his hoarse voice, "You ungrateful girl. We couldn't even reach you. Now let's see where you'll run." He brushed me aside, striding toward her. Xingyu froze for a moment, and when she recognized them, she turned to run back inside. But the man grabbed her arm, causing the documents in her hands to scatter all over the floor. "Yali, call the police." I shouted to the receptionist, thinking this might be some new scheme of human traffickers. "Police? What for? I'm her father looking for my own daughter. Nobody's laws can stop that." The man's eyes flashed as he responded, utterly self-assured. Xingyu shook her head, trying desperately to pull her arm away. "Let go of me. I told you, I'm not going back." The woman tried to calm her, saying, "Sweetheart, don't talk back to your father. Look at all the schooling you've had, yet you're still so immature." She then turned to me. "We just want her to go back to our county, take the civil service exam, and get a stable job before finding a good match. Isn't that what's best for her?" "You're wasting your breath." Her father cut her off, glaring at Xingyu. "We're her parents. She's our daughter. She has to listen. I told you all this schooling was pointless. Would have been better if she'd just married earlier to help the family out. But no, she had to keep studying, and now she's gone wild and won't listen." He suddenly raised his hand as if to strike her. "I should just end it with you now, you ungrateful girl." Xingyu flinched, instinctively crouching to the floor. I stepped in front of her and pointed to the emergency contact number for the local police station on the wall. "Mr. Zeng, if you try that again, I will call the police." His hand froze in midair, and he glared at me, panting with anger. "You can't fool me," Xingyu shouted, her voice choked with tears. "This isn't about me getting a stable job. You just want me to go back and marry off to the man who paid you the bride price. I've known all along." "You know, so what?" Her father scoffed. "You're still gonna marry him, whether you like it or not.
This isn't up to you."
He moved toward her again, trying to grab her arm. By this point, a few colleagues who had gathered in the hallway to watch were muttering amongst themselves, and one of the male co-workers stepped in to help me hold her father back. Seeing this, her mother came over and started pulling at my arm. "Ma'am, this is a family matter. Don't get involved. Our girl's quitting her job to go home and get married." Several young male employees had already gathered around to protect me, clearly worried I might get hurt. The scene was turning into utter chaos. Suddenly, Xingyu stood up, mumbled, "I'm sorry, Miss Su," pushed through the crowd and ran out the door, covering her face with her hands. Xingyu is 22, a pretty young woman who just graduated this June. Last year, a colleague from the business department, Lu Wenjing, mentioned that her friend wanted a place to intern, saying she didn't mind any work at all. We happened to be short on an assistant in procurement, so we let her give it a try. After interning for half a year, I felt she was serious about her work and meticulous in her tasks. Colleagues in different departments who interacted with her spoke highly of her, so the procurement manager and I decided to hire her after she graduated and assign her some small-scale procurement tasks. Since joining the company, Xingyu has worked diligently. I occasionally run into her working overtime at her desk, either double-checking procurement orders or organizing vendor comparison reports. But one thing never changes. There's always a cup of instant noodles on her desk when I see her working late. One day, I casually asked, "Xingyu, having instant noodles again?" Unexpectedly, her dark face flushed red instantly. She stammered, "There's a lot to do, so it's quicker to eat this." Not thinking much of it, I gently advised her, "Instant noodles lack nutrition. You should go out to get something healthier when you can." She nodded. "All right, Ms. Su. I actually quite like instant noodles." Much later, I learned the real reason this young woman, who said she enjoyed instant noodles, stayed late for overtime. It wasn't just because of the instant noodles. It was because of the 30 yuan dinner stipend. These things, which I'd never given a second thought to, meant the world to her. 2 months ago, the company needed to purchase a batch of equipment overseas. Manager Zhang from the procurement department assigned Xingyu and another assistant, Wang Ying, to join a late-night negotiation call with the overseas supplier. Xingyu was thrilled. That entire afternoon, I could hear her from her cubicle, either consulting colleagues from the integration department about equipment specs or gathering quotes from other suppliers, getting ready for the negotiation. As I was about to leave at the end of the day, the receptionist poked her head in and whispered, "Sister Sue, I was just heading to tidy up the meeting room, and it sounded like there was an argument going on inside." Surprised, I remembered that Xingyu and the others were probably in there on the call. "Xingyu, if you couldn't handle it, you should have said so. Going into a negotiation like that is embarrassing for all of us. Do you realize that?" At the door, I could hear Wang Ying's voice. I'm sorry," Xingyu stammered. "I didn't mean to." Wang Ying sneered. "You didn't mean to? So what? What was that English you were speaking? Do you think the supplier even understood you? You were all talk." "All right," Manager Zhang cut in. "Enough, Wang Ying. And Xingyu, please take note. While our company doesn't have the same English proficiency requirements as foreign firms, a basic command of the language is essential." Xingyu apologized again. Wang Ying slammed the folder and her hands down on the table. "Xingyu, please, stop acting like you're the victim here, as if I'm bullying you. Do you even realize how our company must come across to them? Like we're some cheap operation that lets anyone in. How can we expect them to want to work with us after this?" Unable to listen any longer, I sighed and walked in. "Manager Zhang, got a moment? I'd like to discuss something with you." Manager Zhang glanced at me and then at the two assistants. "All right, that's all for now, meeting adjourned." Wang Ying huffed and marched out. Xingyu, face red with embarrassment, kept her head down and followed quickly. After chatting briefly with Manager Zhang, I went out and noticed Xingyu's bag still on her desk, but she was nowhere in sight. After some thought, I decided to find her for a quick chat. I checked the rooftop and the break room, but she wasn't there. Just as I was about to give up, I heard voices coming from the business department's archive room. "What good is crying?" It was Lu Wenjing's voice. "I told you if you want to stay in Shenzhen, you have to act like a Shenzhen girl. People know we're from the same hometown, and I can't afford the embarrassment." Xingyu responded quietly. "You always say yes when I advise you, but then you go right back to your old ways." Lu Wenjing continued, dissatisfied. "Take what happened today. You know that we're from that poor, remote place. Where would we find a decent English teacher? Who in our class could even afford a tape recorder? But with what we have to work hard, don't we? If your pronunciation isn't good, memorize a few phrases from the textbook. Play it on your phone, word by word, and memorize it. Instead, look at what happened today." "I wanted to," Xingyu said softly, "but my phone is so old. It distorts the sound." Lu Wenjing scoffed. "Then keep going like this. Become the company's poster child for rural English. Let everyone know where you're from so anyone can mock you." Xingyu fell silent, and there was a quiet pause in the room. "Do you know why I help you, Xingyu? Because we're from the same place? Don't kid yourself. I don't even like to mention that place. I'm helping you because you're like me. You don't accept fate. You want to break free from poverty and backwardness. We don't have a privileged background, so if we don't want people to look down on us, we have to act like we're from the city. even if we're faking it. It's not just about English, it's about your dress, your lifestyle. If you don't get it, don't call us hometown friends. I don't want to be thought of as a bumpkin, too. Footsteps approached the door, so I ducked into a nearby meeting room to avoid being seen by Lu Wenjing. After she left, I heard faint sobbing from the archive room. I hesitated, then said, "Zeng Yu, it's Su Yun. May I come in?" The archive room was dark. She was leaning against a filing cabinet in a corner. I walked over and stood beside her. Wang Ying's words were harsh. "Don't let it get to you." Zeng Yu wiped her face. "I know, Sister Su. I know it's my fault. I don't blame her." "Your fault?" I chuckled. "What fault? Your pronunciation? In China, most people's English sounds different from native speakers. Who cares? As long as they understand you, that's all that matters. If they don't, we'll keep practicing until they do." "You don't understand, Sister Su. It's different." Her voice was soft. I dismissed it. "You're worried people mock your accent, right? I've been mocked for my accent too, and I survived just fine. At least those mocking me knew what word I was trying to say." She looked at me in surprise. "Sister Su, your family also?" I guess she wanted to say is also poor or is also from the countryside, but didn't have the nerve to say it out loud. "Not exactly." I shrugged, smiling wryly. "But everyone back home can't seem to tell Lin from Ning. People named Lu Lin and Niu Ning all sound the same to us, don't they?" Zeng Yu's lips curled up. She held back, but couldn't stop herself from smiling. "When I was in college, we had to introduce ourselves. When it was my turn, I got up and proudly announced, 'Good afternoon, everyone.' I hadn't even finished, and the whole room burst out laughing. It turns out I hadn't realized my afternoon sounded off. I thought there was something on my face, so I kept touching my cheeks and forehead while everyone laughed. I must have looked ridiculous. Zeng Yu finally covered her mouth and laughed. I laughed too. "See? It's not a big deal. Here I am, speaking just fine. Who doesn't improve with time? Your accent has nothing to do with whether people respect you. This city won't reject you because of how you speak or because of any other difference. You don't have to worry about those things." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. After that conversation, Zeng Yu did change a little. I wasn't sure if it was to avoid embarrassing Lu Wenjing, or if what Lu said held more weight for her than anything I'd mentioned. First, Zeng Yu started to put more effort into her appearance. One day after lunch, I ran into her in the restroom, touching up her makeup. The lipstick wasn't any luxury brand, but it was still from L'Oreal, as was the mascara. She even had a little makeup bag to keep it all in. Her style also changed, shifting from simple t-shirts and jeans to chic little dresses that accentuated her slim figure. She looked quite like a city girl. The younger crowd at the company would occasionally plan group outings to eat or karaoke, events that Zeng Yu used to skip, mostly because it was usually an AA-style split, costing each person $100 or $2. But after that incident, she never missed one, even joining a few bar nights with colleagues. Her social media also changed. Before, she mostly liked other people's posts or shared internet articles. Now, she sometimes posted her own updates, a plate of homemade stir-fried noodles on a Scandinavian-style plate, or check-ins at trendy milk tea spots with coworkers. Since I'd overheard Lu Wenjing's conversation, I suspected her financial situation wasn't great, so I found it hard to understand her lifestyle changes. Especially when, a few times, I'd seen her sneaking instant noodles from the office pantry close to payday. Instant noodles meant for employees working overtime. But everyone has their reasons. A young, poor girl from the countryside trying to blend into the city, to make her life look more like those around her, and hoping to be accepted and respected. That's understandable. I didn't have any right to judge. Still, I hadn't anticipated how strong her desire to escape her background was, strong enough to give up a love that seemed pure, at least to me. One day, an old classmate was in the city for business. Her schedule was tight, and I had a meeting in the evening, so we only managed to grab a quick dinner at a restaurant near my office. Afterward, I called a car for her, and as we chatted while waiting, I spotted Xingyu standing at a nearby bus stop with a tall, slender young man. When my friend's car arrived, I waved her off and started heading back to the office for my meeting. Passing by the bus stop, I glanced over, curious if Xingyu had left. They were still there, and it seemed they were arguing. The young man tried to grab Xingyu's arm, but she shook him off. We all have a little curiosity, and I'm no exception, so I stopped behind the bus shelter. "Don't be like this," I heard the young man say. "Xiaoyu, I know we don't have money right now, but we're young. A few years of hard work will make a difference." "What kind of difference?" Xingyu shook her head. "The two of us together. One poor, the other poorer. What's ever going to change?" My mom has called several times, asking me to go back to the county near our hometown and take the civil service exam. Why didn't I go? Because I want a better life in the city. But we can't even afford a home together. What kind of better life is that? Sorry, I can't buy a house right now, his voice softened. But we could save up together. I make 8,000 a month, and if I work extra hours, I can bring in 10. I live in the company dorm, so my expenses are low. I'd only need 300 for food, and the rest could go towards our savings. That way, in a year, we could save 100,000. In 4 or 5 years, we'd have enough for a down payment on a small apartment. Xingyu cut him off, her tone firm. "No, that's not the life I want. I told you from the start that even if we're together, we're not getting married. I'll definitely find someone local, like Wenjing's husband, someone with a house, a car, and a city household registration." I didn't stick around to hear the rest. A pang of sadness came over me, though I wasn't sure if it was for Xingyu or the young man. At my core, I've always believed in love above all else. No matter the challenges, I hold on to the idea that I'd never sacrifice love, even in the face of life or death. But if I were Xingyu, what would I choose between love and security? It's not an easy decision. Later, I noticed that people at the company were setting Xingyu up on dates. For a while, she hardly ever worked late. She put on light makeup before leaving and spritz on a sweet perfume. Once or twice, I saw a man picking her up after work. He wasn't tall, looked a bit older than Xingyu, and certainly wasn't as handsome as the young man from that night. But he drove an Audi Q5 and had the air of a middle-class city dweller. One time, I had car restrictions and was waiting by the curb for Shuezhong to pick me up. The man picking up Xingyu happened to park just ahead. I watched as Xingyu dashed out of the building, only for the man to suddenly speed off just as her hand reached the car handle, leaving her stumbling and almost falling to the ground. No one likes to be seen by a familiar face in a moment of embarrassment. Just as I was nervously looking around for a place to duck, Shuezhong's car pulled up. As I got in, he laughed and said I looked like a lost rabbit from afar. I told him what had just happened. He didn't say anything for a while. At the next red light, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Sue, I need to step up my game. The best dowry for a daughter is a strong family. I can't let anyone treat my Amran like that." Suddenly, my eyes felt hot. I unbuckled my seatbelt, leaned over, and kissed him. "I'll work hard too, together with you." He laughed and ruffled my hair. "No need. You keep doing what you love. Don't worry about making enemies. I've got your back." Much later, I realized this was the moment he decided to give up his high-paying job to start his own business. I heard that Xingyu broke up with that guy just a few days later. The news came from Wang Ying during lunch when a few young women in our department were gossiping about it. Apparently, the guy didn't initially know about Xingyu's family situation. He only knew she was from the countryside. Given her style, he figured that, even if it wasn't great, it couldn't be that bad. Then one time, Xingyu went to a class reunion with him, and her MCM bag turned out to be the same style as the one the girlfriend of one of her classmates had. One was real, and one was fake, and anyone who knew their stuff could tell at a glance. The guy's face darkened immediately. At the end of the gathering, he didn't even walk Xingyu out but stormed off on his own. Surprisingly, Xingyu didn't seem too upset. She gritted her teeth and spent over 5,000 to buy a genuine one at a store near the company. Wang Ying then made some snide remarks, saying that since they both worked in purchasing, how could Xingyu have that much money? She wondered if there was something fishy about it. That comment was pretty harsh. Everyone knew about kickbacks, and if that dirt was thrown on her, someone might actually believe it. In the end, Manager Zhang called Wang Ying into the office to give her a reprimand, which is why she stopped talking like that. However, after that incident, the way some people in the company viewed Xingyu became quite complicated. I also heard others gossiping about her being vain, and no one introduced her to any more potential boyfriends. Xingyu started to get anxious. She was distracted in meetings, and her work wasn't as meticulous as it used to be. Once, she even made a mistake with a procurement order, mixing up the quantities of 2 types of network cards, which cost her that month's performance bonus. I thought she might be feeling unfulfilled since she couldn't change her fate through marriage, and I was somewhat disappointed in her. That was until her parents showed up not long after, arguing loudly and wanting to drag her back home to get married. Xingyu ran out of the company, and I felt like I had to step in. I told a few male colleagues to stop her parents while I rushed after her, but she was too fast. By the time I burst out the door, I couldn't see her anywhere among the crowd on the street, and when I called, there was no answer. Her parents made a scene at the company for a while, hoping to catch her, but by lunchtime, when Xingyu still hadn't returned, they hurried off, seemingly to catch a train. Everyone thought that would be the end of it. Although some whispered about it, most colleagues felt sympathetic towards Xingyu. The receptionist even texted her, "Xingyu, come back, it's safe." However, I had a bad feeling that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Sure enough, she didn't show up for work in the afternoon. Around 4 o'clock, Manager Zhang hurried over to find me. "Sister Sue, what's going on with these young people today? How can they just skip work without any sense of responsibility? The contract from this morning needs to be signed with the supplier tomorrow, and Xingyu's left a mess everywhere. We'll have to reprint it, but her computer is password protected and her phone is off. Isn't this just causing delays?" I glanced at the time on my phone. Maybe the girl is feeling down. You know Xingyu has a lot of pride. Just give her some time, and she should be back tomorrow morning. Zhang sighed at my response. It's true, with a family situation like hers, it's really tough. I had no idea her family was like that. But then again, I wonder if it's because of the high housing prices these days. It seems like it's becoming harder for kids from poor rural families to survive in the city. As we were talking, Wang Ying suddenly knocked on my office door, looking conflicted. "Sister Sue, Xingyu just texted me. What do you think this means?" On Wang Ying's phone, a few lines of text were displayed, starting with her computer password, followed by, "I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused you before. It won't happen again." Do you think she won't do anything drastic? Zhang's expression grew serious. Half an hour later, I found the place where Xingyu lived, based on the address registered in the company system. Xingyu M. Suyun. I stood at the door of the shabby rental unit in the city village, knocking for quite a while, but no one answered. A young boy next door peeked out. "Who are you looking for?" I pointed at the door in front of me, and the boy tilted his head in thought. She should be home. I saw her come back after finishing my night shift, and she seemed to be crying. His words made me feel uneasy. I turned to press my ear against the door, straining to hear any sounds from inside. I didn't have high hopes, but thankfully, the door was thin, and I could hear the muffled sound of a girl sobbing. My heart, which had been racing, finally calmed a bit. Leaning against the door, I said, "Xingyu, I know you're inside. Let's talk like this." On that day, I saw a post online talking about how poor one's family is, about how difficult life was when growing up. It said that poor people shouldn't have children, and that I would never get married or have kids to prevent my own children from living the same miserable life I did. The crying from inside grew louder. But I think no matter how poor your family is or how your parents are, being born into this world is a good thing. We were born because we outpaced others, so we have the chance to continue running in this world. Don't you think? It seemed that she had built up a lot of grievances. As I talked about this, Xingyu finally spoke up through her sobs. "I think it's terrible. Being born into a poor family is awful. Having parents like that is awful. Having to carry a potato as heavy as myself to exchange for food is awful. Being scolded for buying a pen because it's a waste is awful. Having to kneel all night just to get half of the tuition for college is awful. Finally coming to the city, but being afraid to even look at McDonald's and KFC is awful. Not being able to afford a reckless romance is awful. Wanting to find a better boyfriend but being looked down on is awful. As she spoke, Xingyu nearly shouted, "All of this is terrible. What's the point of living like this?" She cried out loud inside, and I felt a bit of moisture in my eyes as well. I suddenly realized that what I had just said felt too lighthearted for her. "Xingyu, I was wrong. All of this is indeed terrible. But you've already experienced these awful things, and if you take a step further, there are many good things waiting for you. Having a skill is good, earning a year-end bonus through hard work is good, finding someone you like to strive with is good, saving money to give yourself a home is good, and being accepted by this city with a resilient spirit is good." At this point, I raised my voice. "Xingyu, are you going to give up at this moment?" Her cries diminished until they completely stopped. After a while, footsteps approached, and the door in front of me opened. Xingyu, like a child, leaped into my arms. "Sujie, will all of this really wait for me?" she asked with a thick nasal tone. I thought of Li Xiaohang and smiled. "Yes. I know a boy who came to this city to struggle just like you, with nothing to his name. He didn't even have your university diploma. A couple of years ago, he bought a house and last year his daughter was born." I think what he told me was especially true. He said, "Sister, this is truly a forgiving era. It gives everyone opportunities. Even if your starting point is low, you can still work towards the life you want. Even improving a little every day is good." "Can I do it?" Xingyu hesitated. And I'm so embarrassed. What will everyone think of me in the future? I felt her emotions stabilizing, and my heart finally relaxed. I patted her back. "You're overthinking it. Maybe you're living very hard or feeling very embarrassed, but you don't have that many spectators. You're not that important. That's the reality." Just like some people, compared to their terrible reality, the lives shown in their social media are particularly glamorous. They take pride in getting many likes, unaware that likes are just a casual gesture. No one actually cares how you're doing. Xingyu looked at me, her eyes swollen and speechless. "Sujie, do you really have to say it so directly?" Later, we chatted a lot more. In the evening, I had the hometown dishes she made, which were quite delicious and ruined my diet plan. Before the spring festival, there was a company annual meeting, and after dinner, everyone went out to a bar to have fun. Xingyu had a bit to drink and pulled me out to the balcony to chat. That was when I learned that on the day I went to find her at the rental unit, she had indeed thought about ending her life. Her parents had introduced her to a man in his 30s, a widower. Other than being a civil servant with a good family background, Xingyu knew nothing about him. Her parents only emphasized the fact that he was willing to pay an 188,000 yuan bride price. So, one could imagine how cold her heart must have been and how disappointed she felt. "What about now? What do you think?" I asked her. Xingyu looked up at the starry sky. The newly curled hair was blown by the wind, making her seem like she was ready to take off. "I don't know. The good things you mentioned, I haven't encountered yet. But I think, no matter what kind of original family background I haven't done anything wrong. I have the right to strive for the life I want. This city will surely not deny a way out for those who work hard, right?" As she spoke, she raised her beer and gently clinked it with mine, whispering, "Thank you, Sujie." Standing side by side on the winter night's terrace, we talked about our pasts and our futures. Finally, I asked her, "What about that boy? I can see that he really likes you." Xingyu shook her head. "I hurt him. He won't forgive me." I fixed her hair. "If you like him, go find him. Even if he doesn't forgive you, so what? You must make the greatest effort now so you won't regret it later." She hesitated for a long while, her eyes gradually lighting up. Then she turned and ran off. I took out my phone and called Shuizhong. I think I saved a girl. He pretended to sigh. What can we do? The girl who loves to meddle, Su Xiaoyo, must be feeling proud now. Will she meddle even more in the future? We both laughed.